Small steps to big skills. Paraphrasing and summarizing are critical skills for writing and for reading. In this presentation, we're going to take a look at the first strategies we use to teach our youngest learners how to do these really big and really important literacy skills so that they can paraphrase and summarize with ease, with confidence, and with accuracy. To begin, let's take a look at the terms paraphrasing and summarize and talk about what do they actually mean. We like to use analogies to help these concepts make sense. And so when we look at the word paraphrase, when we think about what that one means, we can make some analogies such as this one, flour and sugar and eggs and butter. If we mix those up, if we make them become something, what is it? Well, it's a cake. For one, right? That's a great use of paraphrase here. We've got all these ingredients and we mix it up and we get a cake. A fruit platter. Well, we could take some of the different fruits and create an edible arrangement. So in this case, we're taking the little bits of the fruit at different times, pulling them together and making this beautiful edible arrangement with all of the fruit by the end. So it's the same stuff, it's just mixed up differently. What about a pile of laundry? Well, we can fold those and create a nice folded pile of clothing. So again, same information, same stuff, just mixed up differently. And in this case, organized, right? So that's really what we want students to think about when they hear the word paraphrase, is that it's the same stuff, it's just mixed up differently. So let's take a look now at a few more. So a piece of ribbon, take that, mix it up. What do you get? A bow. All right, a pile of damp sand, take that, mix it up. What do you get? A sandcastle. And lastly, my favorite, fruit and veggies, yogurt and ice. Mix all those up. What do you get? Yep, a smoothie. So we want students to think about when they hear the word paraphrase, I take something, I take content that I've read, I mix it up, I stay accurate to what it is, but I put it into my own words. Versus with summarizing, notice now the connecting term in the middle is no longer becoming, but it's now shrinking to. And that's really the essence of summarizing, is that something like a cake shrinks down to a cupcake. What about a fruit platter? If we take that fruit platter and shrink it down, what do we get? Well, one way to think about that is when we go and see a fruit platter, right, at a party or some kind of event, we don't go take the whole platter back to our seat, right? We take a little bit of this fruit and a little bit of that fruit and a little bit of this, and that's exactly what we want students to think about with a summary. We take a little bit from each of the sections, the essence of the sections, and in this case, we can make a fruit bowl. All right, let's go back to our pile of laundry. If we shrink that down, what can we get? Well, maybe one outfit out of it. Or if we take all of the clothes and we want to summarize the clothes, we can put them into one of those vacuum seal bags, right? Where all the air gets taken out. And that's really what a summary is. It's the most condensed version. It's no more fluff, no more air, no more extra particles in this case in that sealed bag. And so that's really what a summary is all about. We want students to think it's the most condensed or the shortest version of the information. So a few more just to get our brain thinking in summarizing fashion. We've got a freight train. If we shrink that down, what could we get? A model train. A steak, if we shrink it down, piece of jerky. And lastly, grapes. We shrink those down, some raisins. Yep. So we like to tell students that summarizing is like taking grapes and turning it into raisins, or it's the raisin to the grape, right? We just want the essence of what they read or the content. We don't want all the juicy details. So here they all are on the screen. And what we love for students to start to do is to make connections to paraphrasing and summarizing outside of the academic world and to really encourage them to look in their everyday lives. What are instances of them paraphrasing and summarizing? So hopefully these will get their creative ideas flowing and the connections being made. What we like to teach students is 5 strategies for paraphrasing and summarizing. The first is keep, and that is simply to use to look for words that are okay for us to pull into our writing. So sometimes students, when they hear that they have to paraphrase or summarize, they feel like they have to change all the words, and or they copy directly from the text all of the words. So either way, whether we're changing every single word or we're copying every single word, we're not truly doing a paraphrase or a summary. So we want students to learn and figure out which words are okay for me to pull in where I'm not going to get in trouble for plagiarizing. The second strategy is to rephrase, and that's to find synonyms or other ways to say words and phrases and even whole sentences. Strategy 3 is to restructure, and this is where we rearrange the order of the ideas in the sentence or a section. So we might take something from the end of a sentence and we put it at the start of the sentence that we write. To combine, strategy number 4 is to look for content across multiple sentences that we can say, oh, I'll take a little bit from here and a little bit from here and put it all together into a new sentence that is of a different structure than the original source. And lastly, to categorize is to identify bigger categories of information. This one really gets into the summarizing realm where we are shrinking down. We're looking now, in this case, at a category of information rather than telling all of the members of the category. So all of them are strategies that can be used for paraphrasing and summarizing, with categorizing being one that's really more in the summarizing realm, and also that combining and restructuring. Those two also can certainly help with summarizing. What you're seeing pop on the screen now are just the way that we annotate each of these. So to keep, when we want to keep words, we just highlight them in yellow. When we want to rephrase, we box it in orange, and then we do a little brainstorming design and think about what are some synonyms or other ways to say the information. When we restructure, we are going to use a curved line with arrows on the end to indicate that we're switching this placement with this placement. To combine, we underline in blue. And lastly, to categorize, we're going to make a classifying design. And we typically do that in gray just to have a different color for each of the strategies. So let's give it a try. Let's take a look at our story here. Who has eggs? Who has eggs? A cow does not have eggs. So right here, we're going to stop and think, how can we paraphrase this information? How can we press pause, process this information, better comprehend what we've just read, and say it in our own words? Okay, so we're going to mix up our information like we're putting it into a blender to make a word smoothie. So let's go through our strategies to do that. So strategy number 1, to keep. As we look at the sentence here, a cow does not have eggs. We can definitely include the word cow as one of the words that we can keep because there's really not a lot of other ways to say cow, right? As we think about that, are there any other words that there's just really not another way to say it? Probably eggs too, right? Not too many synonyms for eggs. I can't think of any. So these are 2 words that are examples of the keep words that we want students to be able to identify in sentences. Strategy number 2 is to rephrase. And what we're doing here is we're looking for, okay, we've got the words that we need to keep. Now, what are the words that we can say differently? And in this case, we're going to focus in on the word have. And for this sentence, the word have is really meaning to make or to lay eggs. So that's why we have it as 2 options to replace have. There are other synonyms for have, right? To possess something would be to have it as well. But in this case, we're really talking about that cows do not make or lay eggs. So that's why those 2 are options for us. So it's not exactly synonym work in the truest sense of the definition of a synonym. It's more of how can we rephrase? How can we say it differently? And in this case, we have to know the context, right? To know that we're talking about making or laying eggs. So that's it. We're going to stop with those two strategies and we're going to paraphrase that. So the example sentence is cows do not lay eggs. Now, a lot of that sentence is still very similar, but keep in mind, this is right out of the gate, just beginning to teach these strategies. And so this is a wonderful first step for students to learn how to do. What are the words I can keep and what are the words that I can rephrase and come up with a related sentence, right? But not one that's completely identical to the original source. So let's try it again. A pig does not have eggs. As we think about the strategies here, which words can we keep? Well, definitely pig and eggs. And then if we think about rephrasing, we already know we've got the word have, and we can change that out to either make or lay. So again, we're just going to practice those two strategies right here on these first couple of pages to give ourselves enough time to practice this. So our paraphrase content is now, a pig does not lay eggs. All right, well then who has eggs? It's not cows, it's not pigs. Who has eggs? Well, the horse has no eggs. I think he's laughing about it actually. So let's go through our strategies here. Which words can we keep? We know this by now. It's going to be the animal and the word eggs. And then let's rephrase. In this case, we've got a different verb. We now have has, but it still is meaning the same thing, right? It's meaning to make or to lay. We're also going to restructure. So what we want to do this time around is we want to take eggs and horse and put them in different places in the sentence, rearrange them in the sentence. So this is really wonderful to have your students have these pages, use these markers, and make these annotation marks so that they're understanding all of these strategies. We're really taking an implicit process and making it explicit, bringing it out on paper for them to try out. So in this case, because we're starting the sentence with eggs, here is an example of what we could potentially come up with as a paraphrased content. Eggs are not made by horses. All right, the goat has no eggs. So we would want students on this page to highlight which words? Goat and eggs. What would they need to rephrase? Has. And we've got a couple options there. And then to restructure again, we're going to take eggs and start the sentence with that. So we could potentially have something like eggs are not made by goats. Okay, so we're going to now go into strategy 4, which is to combine. So we've practiced keep and rephrase on every single page. We've practiced restructuring twice in terms of our sentences about our horse and our goat. And now we're going to work on combining. So I'm going to underline eggs are not made by horses and goats in this case, and let's see what we can put together. Maybe it's something like this. Eggs are not made by horses or goats, or horses and goats do not make eggs. So we're getting students to, in this case, do the restructuring and the combining at the same time in these paraphrase contents. I do see one little blooper that our blue line should be under the sentences, not going through them. So just make sure that when you're doing this with students, those blue lines are going underneath the words, not through them like the example is on the screen. All right, let's go back to our first couple pages about cows and pigs. And it's probably going to go through it. There it is, right through the words. So we're going to combine cows do not lay eggs and pigs. What can we say here? Well, pigs and cows do not lay eggs. Or maybe pigs nor cows lay eggs. So we want students to be practicing all of these. Every one of these paraphrased content sections is something that we want students to orally practice. Even if they're not reading the sentences on their own, getting them to repeat it back is really important for them to begin to have those brain processes become something that they can rely on moving forward when they're reading. And all of these skills to keep words, to rephrase sentences, to restructure, or sorry, to rephrase words as well, to restructure sentences, to combine sentences, all of these are active reading skills, and so it's boosting students' comprehension. Okay, let's keep going a little bit more in our story. The sheep has no eggs. The donkey has no eggs. Who has eggs? The red hen has eggs. You see them in the picture? So let's talk now about our last strategy, our categorize. So what we want to do here is take a look at as as many pages or sentences as we feel go together and think about what group could they all belong to? What category do they belong to? So we have all the pages of the story on the screen here. And what we really want to, again, remember to do with summarizing is to shrink down, going from grapes to raisins. So we want to come up with the raisin idea. So the question to ask students for this particular book is what goes in the center? What connects all of this information? We've got a cow and a pig and a horse and a goat and a sheep and a donkey and a red hen. What goes in the middle here? Well, they're all farm animals, right? That's one big category, and I could leave it there. But I want to keep thinking about what what were the categories or the biggest category that was talked about in the text? What's a connection I can make with a message that repeated over and over in this case in the story? And so if I actually remove the red hen from this brainstorming design, now what goes in the middle is no longer farm animals, but it is farm animals that do not lay eggs, right? We learned that all of these animals do not lay eggs. So that becomes the category now that they all fit into once we remove the red hen. So what do we do with that information? Well, this is where we really are branching into our summarized content. We could say something like most farm animals do not lay eggs, such as a cow, a pig, and sheep, right? However, hens lay eggs. So this is the most summarized version. It still has some paraphrase when we are listing out the different animals, but it's the most condensed version out of all of the sentences that we wrote. So this is a wonderful introduction for you to begin to utilize with your students of number one, reviewing what paraphrasing and summarizing, what those two terms mean, and then to start to work through as you read literally sentence by sentence, what can we keep? What can we rephrase? What can we restructure? What can we combine? And then what can we categorize as we get both a paraphrase figured out first, and then we look at summarizing, getting to the bigger categories and the gist of what the text was all about. So I wish you great success with paraphrasing and summarizing. This is a set of skills that needs to be practiced so frequently to help students become stronger readers and writers.